Morning all, Brian S. Pratt here. So I'm going to read chapter 25 of my book, Warrior Priest of Dmon-li, book 3 of the Morcyth Saga. Now, we've only got 8 more chapters to go after this one, so a little over a week we should have this done. I'm up early this morning to try to get this done. My brother's here, and it's taking up a lot of my time. So I'm doing the best I can. So here's chapter 25. Upon leaving the warehouse, Jiron and Miko followed the street until they came to the west gate overlooking the bridge. The gate was shut with scores of archers and soldiers lining its battlement. "I think we can forget about leaving through there," Miko said. "It might be a bit crowded," agreed Jiron, chuckling. They turned to follow the main thoroughfare along the wall as they continued their reconnoitering. "What exactly are we looking for?" "Oh, I'm not really sure," admitted Jiron, "but getting an idea of where everything is usually a good idea." "I suppose so," agreed Miko. "When the City of Light fell, James and I didn't know where anything was. We just kept running around trying to find a way out. Eventually, we got separated, and, well, you know the rest." "Yeah," stated Jiron. "Let's hope that this time, things will work out better." All of a sudden, Miko's stomach started cramping when he caught wind of the delicious aroma announcing fresh baked bread. Looking around, he spied a probable source. Several buildings down a side street sat an inn with a sign hanging outside indicating a restaurant within. His stomach let out another growl as he indicated the inn and said, "I'm hungry. Let's get something to eat." "Good idea. I'm hungry too," Jiron said as they made for the inn. The odor of fresh baked bread grew stronger the nearer they came. They secured their horses to the post outside before walking in. A large fat man, similar to the one on the sign outside, came over as they entered. "Welcome, sirs. How may we help you here at the Satisfied Gent?" he asked with a broad, friendly smile. The mouth-watering aroma has led us here," Jiron explained. "Ah, of course," the man said. He gestured to the crowded common room and said, "Just find a seat anywhere, and someone will be along momentarily to see about your needs." Jiron led them into the room and inside when he found the only table left unoccupied sat exposed in the middle. Really not wanting something out in the open like that, but having no other choice, they went over and took their seats. A girl came and after getting their order for roasted beef and ale, returned to the kitchen. She returned shortly with their food and the ale. "Enjoy," she said as she placed the food before them. She then promptly moved to another table where a man was signaling for her. "Now that he's back, the alliance will stand firm. Can't stand the waiting. I wish it would begin." Conversation around them drifted from news of the day to the invading army across the river and the return of Lord Pytherian. For the most part, the people seemed none too worried. From what they gathered, the people in Lithilla had great faith in Lord Pytherian and the alliance. Hate to think what would have happened had Lord Pytherian not returned," remarked Miko between bites. "I know," replied Jiron. "This city probably would have already fallen. From what we're hearing, he's their strength and their will to fight." They continued listening to the conversation around them while finishing their lunch. Miko sat back with a contented look on his face. "Ready to go?" asked Jiron. Sure, said Miko, just for letting go with a loud belch. He gave Jiron a grin. That was good. Outside, they again mounted their horses and continued their way along the street bordering the wall. They eventually came to the south gate, the one through which they had originally entered the city the day before. The stream of humanity coming in through the gate continued unabated. The guards did their best to keep the gates clear and maintain order. "I don't know if I'd come here if I were them." "They may have no choice," Joe replied. "A walled city with ample soldiers and a strong leader is preferable to being out there unprotected, even if the city is on the verge of being attacked." "I suppose so," said Michael. They moved past the gate as they continued following the road. Some of the houses have been built against the wall and may afford a way out, providing, of course, that the enemy hadn't yet taken the walls. The eastern gate, when they reached it, had a stream of people leaving the city. Some pushed or pulled wagons and carts, while the great majority carried bundles on their backs, holding what few possessions they were able to carry with them. "Jiron, over here," said Michael, pointing to the right. Looking over to where he indicated, he saw a small grate set in the side of the street which allowed excess water to flow into the sewers. Excess water. He dismounted and then moved to inspect it. Kneeling, he took hold of the grate, and then quickly looked around to see if anyone was watching. Once he was certain of not being observed, He tried to pull up the grate. Straining as hard as he could, he wasn't able to budge it. Not this way. I think it's bolted or secured in some fashion. It's not going to budge. Getting back on his horse, they continued down the street. Now that they had seen one, they searched for more of these grates that were positioned periodically along the sides of the street. Too bad we can't take a look inside a house, Michael said. There could be an entrance to the sewers. Possibly, agreed Jiron, but I don't think we'd want the kind of trouble that would bring right now. True, said Miko. Suddenly, Miko exclaimed, "Tarts!" Jiron turned in his saddle and glanced over to him. What? Look, he said as he pointed to a boy walking down the street eating a berry-filled tart. He moved his horse to the boy and asked, "Where did you get that?" The boy looked up, some of the fillings smeared around his mouth, and said, "Nanny down the street sells them." He pointed back down the way he'd come. "Thanks," Michael said. "What's that all about?" Jiron asked. "I'm going to get me some tarts," he explained. "I'll get some for James, too. He likes them." Jiron just shook his head, but since the shop was on their way, he didn't argue. When they reached the shop selling the tarts, he waited outside with the horses while Michael went inside. Several minutes later, the door to the shop opened, and Michael walked out with a large bag stuffed to overflowing. Smiling, Jiron asked, "Think you got enough?" "Hope so," he replied, not even realizing Jiron was being sarcastic. He put the tarts in one of his saddlebags, keeping hold of one for the road. Having a tart in one hand made mounting difficult, but he managed it. Once in the saddle, they resumed following the wall as they continued around the city. They came across more houses built against the inside of the outer wall. All fell short of the top by at least 20 feet, due in part to a city ordinance designed to prevent unauthorized access to the top of the wall. The northern gate was crowded. Not too surprising, there were none here trying to enter. Anyone to the north of the city moved deeper into Matic, away from the enemy. "Doesn't look like there's any way out of here," Michael said when they headed back to the warehouse. "No," agreed Jiron. "I didn't figure there would be. At least we now have a fair idea of the city's layout. Hopefully, James will be able to see Lord Pytherian soon, and then we can be on our way back to Cardry." "Let's hope so," said Jiron. The crowd grew thicker as they approached an intersection of streets. A wagon sat crooked at the juncture with a broken wheel, effectively congesting the traffic flow. Several men worked to replace the wheel. All the while, those passing by shouted obscenities. Jiron felt sorry for those guys as he slowly moved forward, creeping closer to the blockage. From where he sat next to him, Michael suddenly gasped and grabbed his arm. "What?" he asked as he turned to see what was the matter. A shiver ran down his spine when he saw Michael's pale face staring down the side street. He never took his eyes from where he gazed as he whispered, "Look there." Jiron searched where he indicated, but didn't understand what he was trying to show him. "I don't see anything," he said, before taking notice of several men who stood outside a store talking amongst themselves. "That group there," he asked. "That group there?" he asked, pointing to them. Nodding, Michael said, "See the one there, the one with the patch over one eye?" Giving the man a closer look, he nodded. "You mean the one with the scar across his face?" "That's him," Michael said breathlessly. "He's the one who poisoned the guards back at the City of Light and opened the gates for the enemy." Now, if you'll remember, this is old One Eye, and that comes out in a minute. He originally was interrogating and torturing Paralyn back in Cardry, and James rescued him. And the scar across his face is from when he was about ready to fire a crossbow, and James snapped the crosswire and it took him across the face. Then, of course, there was the whole thing with the City of Light when he was trying to poison the guards and open the gate for the enemy. "Are you sure?" "Positive," he replied, then glanced to Jiron. "He had me and James captured and was torturing James before we managed to get out." Lowering his voice, he continued, "He's definitely an agent of the Empire." The crowd finally began moving again, and they made it around the blockage. Getting down from their horses, they led them to a post out front of an inn where they secured them. Jiron pulled Michael close and said, "We need to tell someone." "But who?" Michael asked. "When James gets back, we can tell him and then go to Lord Pytherian. He needs to know about this." James might not be out for hours, he replied. We should follow them and see what they're up to. If we lose them, we might never find them again before whatever they're planning comes to fruition. All right, well, let's be careful, Michael said. He then followed Jiron as they walked back to the corner where he peered around to watch the group of men. The group was breaking up, and most moved together down the street away from them. They're leaving, he said, before stepping around the corner to follow. With the amount of people on the street, it was fairly easy to keep them in sight without being spotted. Old One-Eye moved deeper into the city. As the group progressed down the street, the others with him began to break off down various side streets until finally only One-Eye was left. When they came to realize where he was heading, they couldn't quite believe it. As he approached the gates to the castle area, the guards on duty nodded to him in acknowledgement before he passed right through. Jiron indicated an alley and they moved into it, all the while keeping the gate in sight. This can't bode well, he said. If he has access to the castle, then there must be someone of rank here in the city behind his activities. Could whatever he's planning be what the army across the river is waiting for? That would make sense, agreed Jiron. We better get back to the warehouse and wait for James to return. What if One-Eye decides to do something before we're able to speak with James? Asked Michael. Nothing we can do about it right now, replied Jiron. We're going to have to hope we can contact James before he does. We should tell someone. And who would we tell? Jiron asked. If we tell the wrong person, we'll be silenced and then no one will know what's going on. Pointing back up the castle, he added, those guards up there knew him, or at least had seen him often enough to recognize him. I wouldn't know who to trust other than Lord Pytherium. I guess you're right. Not happy about it, Michael tried to think of an alternative to just sitting and waiting, but couldn't come up with anything. Sighing, he looked at Jiron and nodded. They returned to where their horses were secured and then rode back to the warehouse. As they approached, the guards who had bothered them earlier in the day about being in the warehouse were leaving from a side door. Pausing until the guards moved farther down the street and out of sight, they returned to the warehouse where they got comfortable to await the return of James and Fifer. Now for another scene. The closing of the door brought him back to consciousness, or something close to it. Opening his eyes, he quickly shut them tight again as he blocked out the nauseatingly swirling of the nausea. Okay, how about this? The nausea-inducing swirling of the room. See, sometimes you got to read stuff out loud, just and that's how you find out that stuff doesn't flow very well. His head felt foggy, and he couldn't think straight. A moan next to him said Fifer was in the same state as he, maybe worse. Hands suddenly grabbed him and sat him up straight on the couch he laid upon. A hand slapped him hard across the face, and then someone pulled open his eyelid as he stared at his pupil. The blurry face of the man was somehow familiar, but he couldn't quite recall from where. His mind wouldn't focus long enough to draw out the memory. They've taken too much, the voice said with impatience. They'll be worthless for hours. Forgive me, another voice begged. We didn't know what they would eat, so we laced everything. That they were so hungry was unexpected this late in the morning. Let me know when they are able to talk, the first voice said commandingly. Yes, sir, the second voice replied, distraught over the dissatisfaction of the other. First thing. The door again opened, then closed. James was again resting in blissful silence. Back to Jiron. Where are they? Jiron asked from where he paced back and forth in front of the warehouse window. He again paused as he looked outside. Night had long since fallen, and he was getting worried. Maybe we should inquire at the gate for them, Michael asked for the third time. Jiron turned from the window. All right. When he saw Michael going for the horses, he said, Leave them. Leave them. They'll just get in the way. Michael stopped and returned to him as he opened the door to leave. Outside on the street, the amount of people from earlier in the day had dwindled dramatically, and they were able to move quicker than before. Keeping their eyes open for old One-Eye, they moved toward the gate where they'd been turned away the night before. Damn, Jiron silently cursed when he saw the same men on duty from the previous night. When the guard saw them coming, he got a smirk on his face as he moved to meet them. Back again, he said. I thought I told you guys you couldn't pass through. I understand that, Jiron said, trying not to provoke anything. But earlier, two of our friends were admitted to the castle area. We were to meet them, but they failed to return. Could you tell us if you have heard anything about them? You mean those other two guys that were with you the other night? The guard asked. Yeah, that's them, replied Jiron hopefully. Sorry, haven't heard anything. He looked over to the other guards and asked, Did you hear anything? The others shook their heads no. Sorry, the guard said. Don't know what to tell you. Thanks anyway, replied Jiron as he turned to leave. The guard watched them until they turned the corner and passed out of sight. Miko asked, Now what are we going to do? I don't know, but we have to find out what happened to them, said Jiron. I wish I could do that mirror trick of James's. Yeah, that would be nice right now, agreed Miko. They walked away some silence before Miko said, If Miller and his men were in the city, where would they be? I don't know, replied Jiron. Probably back in the castle area. Why? I don't think they'd be there, Miko said. This place is overrun with guards and soldiers of the various alliance factions. They would have to be built at somewhere out in the city. Only the highest ranking soldiers would be permitted within the castle area. Jiron stopped and looked at Miko as he contemplated his words. He began nodding as he said, You may be right. If that was the case, wouldn't they be put up in a cheap inn? Most likely, agreed Miko. Let's try searching for them, Jiron stated. It's all we have to go on. An hour and 15 less than desirable establishments later, they still hadn't found them. The last place had tested even Miko's limits on cleanliness. James must be rubbing off on him. The next inn they came to was located near the north gate. As they approached, they found several soldiers and mercenaries standing around outside, which gave them some hope they would find them. Jiron swung the door open and stepped inside just as a bottle smashed into the door near his head. Instinctively ducking, he looked around the common room at the brawl going on. To their amazement and relief, Miller's band was right in the middle of it. One man, the proprietor most likely, shouted for them to desist, but only got socked in the jaw for his efforts. Everyone but the participants in the brawl had moved to the side of the room, giving them their space. Those that were outside came in to watch, calling to the various fighters as they encouraged them to greater endeavors. Jiron saw money changing hands as some bet on the outcome. Miller's band appeared to be getting the better of the others as they had more men left standing, so Jiron and Miko just stayed on the edge of the crowd. Miller and one of his men tossed another of the combatants through the air. Bystanders scrambled out of the way as the man sailed through the door and out into the street. Miko waved at Miller when he saw him looking in his direction, distracting him just as a fist connected with his jaw. Flailing backward, Miller tripped over a table and landed on his back. Rubbing his jaw, he got to his feet quickly and rejoined the fight. The last of the opponents fell fast until only Miller's band stood. 1 second. A cheer erupted from the crowd, and everyone returned to where they were before the fight broke out. Miller came over to them and said, You made it! I really didn't think to ever see your faces again. He looked around and said, Where's that layabout Fifer and that other one, James? Jiron flashed a quick glance up to Miko, then said, Didn't Shyn tell you we were here? Shyn? Asked Miller, a dark look building upon his face. I haven't seen that rat since we entered the city. He disappeared shortly after we arrived. I'll kill him when I find him. We need to talk, Jiron said as a foreboding came over him, right now and in private. Miller studied his face, then nodded. Let's go to my room. We can talk there. He hollered to his men, Be back in a minute. His men just gave him a wave as they downed more ale. Leading Jiron and Miko down a dark, dingy hallway, he took them to a small room in the back. After they entered and shut the door, he asked, Now, what's all this about? Jiron proceeded to tell him about the incident at the gate the first night. Then he went on to tell of Fifer's finding of Shyn and how he helped James and Fifer get into the castle area. Out on patrol? Miller cried out. Ha! We've been sitting on our butts in this damn inn since coming to the city. And if he had suffered an injury, it's going to be nothing compared to what I'm going to do when I finally lay my hands on him. There is more, said Jiron. He waited a second for Miller to compose himself, then told him of Shyn leading Fifer and James into the castle area, and then of their failure to meet them again at the warehouse. I think they may be in trouble, and Shyn is the key to finding them. Miller considered what he'd said a moment, then said, Let me get my boys. He opened the door and returned to the common room. You didn't tell him about One Eye, Miko said. Let's worry about one thing at a time. Miller returned with his men, and they managed to squeeze They managed to squeeze into the small room before shutting the door. He gave them a rundown of what was going on. Several assumed dire looks, and Michael almost felt sorry for Shyn should they ever find him. Okay, boys, here's what we'll do, Miller announced. Let's quickly comb the city and return here in 1 hour. The one who brings Shyn to me gets a bonus, preferably alive. They nodded. Okay, get a move on. Be back in 1 hour. His men hurried out the door and quickly left the inn as they began combing the city for Shyn. Think they'll find him? Jiron asked. If he's not holed up somewhere, Miller said, they'll find him. Why have you just been sitting here in this inn? Jiron asked. Orders, he explained. We were told to stay here until word came for us to go on patrol or the enemy attacks. Who gave you those orders? Inquired Jiron. A guard in the livery of the city watch, he explained. Why? It just seems too convenient for you to be here at an inn that's about as far from the castle as you can be, he explained. If Shyn's up to something, or in with the enemy, it's sure been helpful to have you all stashed here where you're unlikely to discover whatever he's up to. Nodding, Miller paced the floor. A little over an hour later, the door opened up and Shyn was shoved into the room from behind. He had one eye swelled shut and blood oozed from his nose and mouth. Where did you find him? Miller asked his men as they followed Shyn into the room. Uther, a tall, brown-haired man, replied. He was on his way back into the castle area. He almost made it to the gate before Jory got hold of him. Going over to where Shyn laid on the floor, Miller said, "Get up." When he didn't comply, Miller kicked him hard in the side. I said, "Get up, now." Coughing from being kicked, Shyn got on his hands and knees and used a chair to help himself rise off the floor. Unable to stand, he collapsed back into the chair. What did you do to him? Miller asked as he looked to his men. He didn't want to come with us at first, Uther replied. We had to convince him. You damn near killed him, accused Miller. Uther just shrugged. Michael came over and grabbed Shyn by the shirt. Make him tell what he did to James. Miller grabbed his arm and had him let go of Shyn's shirt. We will, lad. Turning back to Shyn, he asked, Well, where are Fifer and James? Shyn raised his head and stared into Miller's eyes defiantly, remaining silent. Miller cocked his arm back and then struck him on the chin. Shyn's head snapped back, and when it came forward again, fresh blood dribbled from the side of his mouth as he spit a tooth out onto the floor. Signaling to Jory, Miller had him draw his knife and come over. Now, I'll ask you again, where are they? When he again failed to answer, he nodded to Jory, who, with the help of another of Miller's men, grabbed Shyn's left hand and placed the edge of the knife alongside his pinky. Fear was evident in Shyn's eyes as he stared at the knife, ready to sever his little finger. His eyes flicked to Miller as Miller again asked, Where? Giving him a moment to reply, Miller said to Jory, On 3, slice it off. Jory nodded as he readied himself. Miller looked into the fearful eyes of Shyn as he said, 1. Sweat began to bead on the man's face as he glanced first into Miller's eyes and then back at the knife threatening his finger. We've got all night, Miller told him, no hint of mercy in his voice. There are 19 more fingers and toes after this one than other parts of your body. A few more seconds went by before he said, 2. Sweat began to drip off the end of Shyn's nose. His breathing grew labored as his eyes focused on the knife at his finger. Then his eyes looked to Miller. He saw him begin to say 3 when he cried out, Okay! Miller motioned for Jory to let go of his hand and backed away. Now, where are they? In the castle area. Where in the castle area? Miller asked. In Councilman Rillian's building, he explained. I think they are still on the 2nd floor. What interest would Council Rillian have in them? Who's this Rillian? Jiron asked. Miller glanced at him as he replied, He's one of the members of the Patriarchal Council, very influential and powerful. Turning back to Shyn, he said, I asked you a question. If I tell you, they'll kill me, Shyn exclaimed, looking to Miller for sympathy. He'd sooner get blood from a stone than sympathy from him. I'll kill you now if you don't. Will you let me go if I tell you? Shyn asked. If you can convince me you're not feeding me a pack of lives, then yes, I'll let you go, he assured him. He suddenly drew his dagger and put it to his throat and said, But if you don't, then you'll be feeding the buzzards in the morning. You'll be feeding the buzzards by morning. I like that better. Nodding, Shyn said, okay. Now, began Miller as he replaced his dagger in his belt. What part does Councilman Rillian play in all this? He glanced from Miller to the others in the room as he said, he has been bought by an agent of the Empire. Was it a man with one eye? Michael burst out. Shyn nodded. Yeah, I think his name was Kerrigan or Kerrigan. Corrigan? Michael asked. Yeah, that's it. Who's this Corrigan? Miller asked Michael. He's been hounding us for a while, he explained. Ever since James ran afoul of him back in Cardry. We also believe he was instrumental in opening the gates during the siege at the City of Light. Is that why he's here? Miller asked, turning his attention back to Shyn. I couldn't tell you that, he said. He replied. I don't know much about him. I just saw him prior to taking James and Fifer there. What part did you play in all this? Back before the City of Light, I worked for the Empire, he explained. I would pass information to another agent who would then get the information out of the city. When the city fell, I fled with the other refugees until I stumbled upon your band and joined it. Traitor, one of the men behind him said. You caused the death of thousands of innocent people. There are no innocent people, he replied, just allies and enemies. Miller signaled for his men to remain quiet and hold their anger. He turned back to Shyn. Go on. After we arrived in Lithella, I saw another agent and met with him, he continued. Looking to Miller, he added, that's when I left you to help the organization here. With Councilman Rillian's help, it was easy to put you here so you wouldn't discover what I may be doing. But you still haven't said anything about James and Fifer, Michael cried out. I'm getting to that, he assured him. He pointed to a flagon of ale sitting on a nearby table and asked, can I have that? Miller handed it to him. After a long drink, he continued. The return of Lord Pytherian was an unexpected blow to the Empire. The alliance which had stood against the Empire was beginning to fracture and fall apart. It was easy enough for Councilman Rillian to make the rifts wider by casting doubts upon first one faction, then another. In fact, when I gave my report about his rescue and the role James had played, that's when they came up with the idea for imposters to attempt to assassinate him. Almost worked, too. When it was reported that another James had shown up at the gates, it was fairly easy to track you down. I made sure you were the ones who contacted me first. I just made myself available. Then it was simple to lead James into the trap that captured him. What did you do to him? Demanded Miko. Oh, he's alive to be sure, he explained. They were most explicit in that regard. We set out some food laced with a drug to inhibit his magical abilities and told him to help himself while he waited for Lord Pytherian. Now what? Now what? Jiron asked as he came closer to him. What are they planning to do to him? Shrugging, he said, I was never involved with that. My job was simply to get him there and make sure he doesn't suspect anything. Is there anything else you're not telling us? Miller asked. No, I swear, he exclaimed. Can I go now? What? Miller said with a laugh. I don't think so. We'll just hold you here until we're sure you haven't fed us a bunch of cow dung. Miller turned to his men. Stick out the gates leading from the castle. If you see James or Fifer leave, or anyone else leaving in an odd manner, one of you come back here to me, and another follow. Understand? His men nodded as they left. His men nodded. Hang on. That isn't. His men nodded. As they left, one of them struck Shyn across the back of the head, causing him to cry out. Jiron took to Miller and said, Are you staying here? Someone's got to watch this piece of trash, he replied. You? I'm going to get into that castle area and find James, he explained. Michael, you stay here too. Seeing him start to argue, he held up his hand and said, I may need to go where you can't follow. Stay here and I'll find him, okay? Okay, he said. Jiron went over to Shyn and asked, Where is the building he's being held? There's a courtyard in front of the gates to the castle, he explained. It's the building on the east side. Which room, he asked. On the second floor, he said. Follow the corridor down from the top of the stairs and you'll find a pair of double doors on the right. Last I knew, he was in there. If he's not dead, if he's not, you're dead, Miko said to him. To Jiron, he added, good luck. Thanks, he said as he headed for the door. After opening it, he glanced to a worried Miko and said, don't worry, I'll get him out. When you see him, tell him One Eye's in the city, Miko said. He'll understand. Jiron nodded as he left the room. And there ends chapter 25. So it's getting good. Things are happening. I had one comment once from a reader who says, no, it was a review. He says, the unsuspecting maids. James goes somewhere. James gets hit over the head. James gets captured. James gets rescued, and then repeat. And I did use that quite a bit, but I don't use it so much anymore. It just seemed the right thing to do at the time. So my brother's still here, and on Friday, see, today is Wednesday, I guess. I lose track of days. I lose track of days. Well, on Friday, I leave early to go to my girlfriend. So over that weekend until I come back Tuesday night, I may not be doing this every day. So just be patient with me. You know, girlfriends need to have their time. Need to be focused of the boyfriend's attention and not be sitting there while I'm doing all this stuff. But we'll see what I can do. Y'all take care. Subscribe if you would. I appreciate it. I should mention that at the very beginning, but I get into it and I don't think about it. Oh, speaking of my YouTube channel, it slowed down. I got no new subscribers yesterday. When I woke up yesterday, I had 0 new subscribers. I had 1 new subscriber this morning. So the view time, how long people watch, that's still pretty decent. But I'm not getting new subscribers, that many. I was hoping to get more. Well, we'll see what happens. I am not the most exciting person here. I'm just a guy talking. There's no kitties or deer or stuff like that. Well, there could be deer, but it's really hard to get hold of them. Anyway, I better go. Y'all take care. And I'll see you on